Oh, I have to click and go live. Okay, I think I did that correctly this time. OBS actually told me I was supposed to click go live, but the button looked different, so I didn't think I was live. Just waiting to see confirmation that the stream is up. It says live, though if I try to see it, I see a stream, we're streaming, okay, I see myself now. Okay. Hopefully stuff isn't too distracting. I have my stream and the chat up on my iPad on secondary monitor, but so that things aren't so flashy, I have the brightness super down. But yeah, I guess we're back again for Advent of Code 2022. Things are a bit different this year. Every single other year, I've done Advent of Code on a Mac of some sort because it's my preferred development environment. But after moving to Toronto, ever since then, my Hackintosh partition on my PC has refused to boot, and I have not really cared to debug it because when I'm at home on my PC, I'm just playing games and I just want to use Windows. And so we're trying to make development on Windows work for Advent of Code. So the way that I was able to go fast quickly in the past was using the tooling that I'm really familiar with on OS X or macOS. So stuff like iTerm for like a little drop-down terminal that you can activate with like a global hotkey and stuff. I'm sure I could find replacements like that exist on Windows, but I was a bit too lazy to. So I decided we'll try something different this year. So rather than using Sublime Text and iTerm and some stuff, we are going with Vim to solve our problems, just pure Vim. But to speed things up and handle some of the file I/O, because keyboard shortcuts on Windows and stuff are not necessarily something that I'm super confident with being able to fumble through, is some helper stuff. So I was inspired by Betaveros, who is #1 on the leaderboard almost every year since he started competing. Betaveros was, if you watch one of the videos of them solving their problems, they have this helper thing called like advent.day, and you can use this object and interact with it to submit problem stuff. So rather than having to go into the problem page and take your answer and copy paste it into the text box and submit it, this automatically does the submission for you. Really all it is a wrapper around like making a post request to the website, basically replicating the form. It's not too hard to write. The way I'm choosing to do it is using another library that someone else wrote. If you search for Advent of Code Data, is a Python library that does some of that stuff, as well as grabbing problem inputs too. But it does all the work of caching requests and stuff, and making sure you don't accidentally submit duplicate answers that are the same, because they're going to fail in the same way. And I figured I would do that so that I don't have to handle the caching on my end, because of course we don't want to be hammering the Advent of Code servers every time we're trying to grab a problem input or submitting. Eric's going to have enough fun with the spike in traffic in about 3 minutes and 30 seconds. If I remember correctly, last year the site was like so slow, but we ended up counting the problem for day one, the points anyways, even though I wasn't really able to submit my solution. So we'll see what happens this year. There's also some nice stuff in this object. You'll probably see me interact with it to grab problem input and do some basic parsing as well. if you watch some old streams or VODs, I have a bunch of the same utility functions here for doing input parsing and some, common operations on objects, but I've kind of embedded that into this day object to grab inputs and stuff too. I'm not necessarily opposed to submitting kind of that code, but it's kind of ugly right now, and also I want to gauge how competitive I am this year. I'm currently streaming with only like a 10-second delay because I don't think I'm going to be super competitive, and it'll be more fun to interact with chat and stuff if I can read the messages and not be on like a 3-minute delay like I've been doing in the past. But, in the interest of the competitive spirit, if I end up being rather competitive and people might be watching the stream, having a little bit of obfuscation over how I'm actually solving the problems and stuff, makes me feel better about streaming with 0 delay, right? I don't really want to be manipulating the leaderboard if, there's a problem that I solve relatively early on and then people can just watch the stream. I want to keep some of the sanctity of the competition intact, so that's my rationale for that. I'm not necessarily trying to like hide my secrets or anything. It'll become pretty clear. Oh, also, I mean, it's not necessarily that useful to other people. I find for a lot of this stuff, and Betaveros even admitted it in their blog posts, you want to be really familiar with all the util methods that you've written, because if you're trying to use them to go quickly, you don't want to be reading documentation to figure out what you wrote. So like weird differences in terms of how you name things, what positional arguments you're giving to things, that stuff is obvious if you've written it because you're going to write it in the way that you would expect the tool to work. But if it's something more that someone else wrote that you're trying to use, then you have to learn it and adapt your mind to work in that way, and all of that are impediments to going quickly. But yeah, we'll see how this goes. I've not been writing very much code. This is probably the year in my career where I've written the least amount of code. So it'll be interesting to see how competitive programming type stuff goes if I'm still anywhere in the realm of being competitive. But yeah, either way, it should be fun. Also, there's a much lower likelihood that my Windows partition will crash while streaming. I'm pretty sure it crashed like 5 to 10 of the days of the month when I streamed on Mac, which kind of ruined the experience, both the stream and the puzzle solving. So yeah, here we go. What am I doing, man? Okay, fumbling around a little bit, but I don't remember. Did I leaderboard on this on part 1? I didn't even read what was happening. Okay, well, servers didn't go down, which is good, but I kind of stumbled around typing stuff. I honestly should have just done this from the start, but it didn't. So input parsing actually came really in handy on this problem. Essentially, unlike kind of just a contiguous list of things where it's like, oh, first elf is this much, this elf has this much, each kind of group of lines that are together represented a single elf. And the question was, so for example, this elf is carrying, 6,000 worth of stuff. You sum all the amounts, and part 1 is just asking who's carrying the most in total. So you basically just want to sum up all the numbers and pick the biggest one. And then part 2 was a little more complicated than that. Rather than just figuring out how much is the top elf carrying, you want to figure out the sum of the top 3 elves, right? So you can't just take the maximum. Instead, I guess probably the easy solution is sort the results of all of the elves' calories that they're holding, and then take the first 3 or the last 3 elements in the list, depending on which way you sort it, and then add those together and submit that. So where I was fumbling was trying to obviously sorted returns the smallest number first and then the biggest number. I was trying to think in a limited amount of time what's the quickest way to do that. This ends up being like a pretty clean way to do it, where you slice the list and instead of just picking the first 3 elements, you pick everything from the third element from the right side, which would be, the third last element all the way to the end, and that gives you the 3 biggest things. But I was trying to wrap, it's interesting. I guess sorted returns an iterable that's still indexable, but reversed doesn't. In Python 3, you can't actually slice that. It's an iterator, but let's do some debugging. I'm curious why this wouldn't work. Oh, well, of course it won't work here. So, I guess to explain simultaneously some of the fanciness that I'm doing here, on a couple of my F keys, I have bound, run this program. To F9, I've bound run this program and treat what's on the clipboard as the input. So this is a technique that I used to use while solving, I solved every advent of code like this. And it's really convenient to test different sample inputs, right? Because the problem always gives you a sample input that looks really close to the format of the actual input of the puzzle, which actually is this, right? But I'd rather test this and then just compare it to the expected answer, which is given too. And so that's a convenient thing to have. Then I also have a different F key which says run this problem, but use this input, your true problem input as the standard in, essentially. And the way that works, I guess it might be confusing why I was able to submit and I never even opened up the problem input to solve it. That's handled by that advent of code data repository that I mentioned earlier. It automatically in the background will download the problem input, cache it, and then when you call it to ask for what the input is, which is what my advent utility does, it'll just pull from that. So that's all the IO magic that I'm doing. But yeah, getting back to this, I'm curious why when you try to run reversed, no. Reverse sequence iterator is not subscriptable. Yeah, I mean, I guess like could have just like done something like this too to solve that, right? I mean, that would have worked as well, but you know, panicking in the moment when, for a simple problem like this, like seconds count, I feel like, especially last year, the last couple of years, I've been succumbing to a lot of these problems where it's like dumb bugs or just like in the moment, kind of fumbling around to figure out like what I should do. So it's kind of tricky. Also, you'll see this is cribbed straight from Betaveros' the way that they submit answers. Overloading the division operator on this day class to do a submission for stuff is quite convenient, and you'll see if you if I do this. I guess we can talk a little bit more about this. Also cribbed from Betaveros, some information about what the problem input looks like. This is helpful to debug stuff that I've encountered in the past where it's like, well, is the input, did I copy and paste it incorrectly? Is like what is the width and the height, just to get like a rough estimate of stuff, and then seeing what the output actually is here that I'm about to submit, just make it really easy. And also putting spaces in between so that if I really had to submit because this tool was broken or something, I could just copy paste that, you know, out and paste it into the submission box. So yeah, I mean, I guess just to go over the problem a bit more explicitly, I had this helper thing here to grab all of the basically, okay, we can go through it incrementally. So the first step is to parse the input, right? And that can be done with this thing, day.paragraphs. Paragraphs being like each independent block here. So if I say for like paragraph in this, and I just want to print the paragraph, it looks like this, essentially, see? So we got basically the first elf is the first element, the second elf is the second element, and so forth. So then what we want to do is figure out which elf is carrying the most things. So actually something I should do with my helper is identify if things are just like strictly integers and convert them into integers, or have a way to do that easily. I'm probably gonna do that later, but yeah, so I guess a simple way to do that is just we could just use a list comprehension to turn that basically into number versions of each of those lists. So actually, I mean, we'll just do this. So we have an empty list of elves, and for paragraph in day.paragraphs, right, we can say elf has like 0 calories, right? And then for n in paragraph, because that's going to be, each of these lines is going to be one of the n's, right? We want to add this many calories, which we have to convert that string to an integer. So now if we print elves, we'll get a count, oops, and then elves.append elf, of course. We'll get a count of the total calories, just like we want, right? And then so for part 1, the answer is going to be just the maximum of elves, right? Pretty straightforward. 2400, that's what we were expecting. For part 2 though, we want to sort the list and then take the sum of the, remember we want the top 3 elves, right? So a way to do that, I think just simply here, now that we just have this like list that we're interacting with, is probably just sum of sorted elves, and once we sort the elves, we want the final 3 elements, like that. And then we take the sum of all of those, which is 4500, and then if we run this on the true problem input with my other thing, you can see like on the clipboard, right, we're only doing 14 lines versus on the real thing we're doing much more lines, so just a little bit of double checking your work. The puzzle answer here is 69 to 06, and then over here it's this. So yep, pretty straightforward day one. I'm just trying to talk through some of what I'm using to solve. I wonder, 30 seconds. I feel like this is a new record for the fastest to part one of any problem. I remember there were some like 50-second answers or so in the past, but this is really fast. But we definitely, in our fumbling around, went from 26 here, speaking of beta Veros, 26 here down to, I think it said 177th on part 2. So where does that place us in the global leaderboard, or do we not even get there because we only got points for, okay, we're 62nd on the global leaderboard. It's a start, obviously super high variance at the beginning. We'll see where the next day takes us. So thank you for watching, and I'll be back again tomorrow. Oh yeah, the other interesting thing is now that I'm on the East Coast, the problems actually unlock at midnight instead of 9 PM. So I feel like midnight is actually a much more, my brain is awake and I'm done doing things for the day. So maybe that'll balance out the fact that I haven't been writing much code at all for the past year, but we'll see. Anyways, thank you for watching.